Okay, I know you are talking very serious, maybe discussion, but this is also very important too. Can we start? Thank you very much. First of all, the meeting this evening will be live streamed to the public, and any exempt private items on the agenda will be taken at the end of the meeting, and the live stream will cease prior to the meeting moving into private. There might be a short delay. A recording of the public part of the meeting will be available on the council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. Attendees are required to wear masks on entry to the building and meeting room, but may remove them when seated. Would everyone in the hall ensure that they have scanned their mobile phone on the QR NHS COVID app at the entrance to the council chamber? Would members and officers please remember to switch their microphones on when speaking and speak directly into the microphone and switch off when finished speaking. Can all those who have joined the meeting using the Skype meeting link please use the conversation box on your screen for questions and comments. Switch off mobile phones or put on silent mode. If you need to use your mobile during the meeting, please leave the chamber and return when finished. Okay. Okay, apologies for absence.
None, Chair.
Okay, minutes of the 6th of September. Any issues, any matter arising? None? Okay, thank you. Section 106 Local Government Act, Finance Act, 1992.
None.
Any?
None, Chair.
No? Okay, disclosure of interest.
None that I'm aware of, Chair.
Urgent business.
None.
A reference from committees and other bodies.
None, Chair.
Okay, so shall we go straight to the youth offending and targeted youth service?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. Hopefully everyone can hear me, but if you can't, please, and I will speak up. I've produced quite a lengthy, detailed document for this group tonight. So what I won't do is I won't seek to kind of reiterate the detail within it, but of course I'm here to answer any questions. I think the important thing to point out about this restructure, Councillor, is this is not a restructure that's based on financial savings. This has probably been in the making for 2 years since our inspection from Her Majesty's Inspector of Probation, but also it's part of the improvement journey we've been on and creating a service that meets the contextual safeguarding needs of the children in Luton. The reality is we've seen significant changes in behaviour over the last 5 years, but even more so over the last 18, 19 months of the pandemic. And what we're seeing is more multiple, complex and damaging health issues and special educational needs and social care needs before young people are even hitting the services that we provide. And what I mean by the services we provide is, you know, for those of you that have heard me speak before and talk about our multi-agency gangs panels or just statutory youth justice itself, essentially they're services for when young people are in crisis. When you look at the changing face of the issues, and the criminal exploitation is the key factor that we're dealing with now. It's the way young people are drawn into these exploitation behaviours that then manifest themselves in gang-associated behaviours, serious violence, and what we see in the media, which sometimes ends tragically, as we've seen in Luton in June. So when we look at the changing face of the needs that we see with young people, we realise that we need to move as a service to change as well. What's important to point out is that we're no longer a youth offending service. The changes that we made in 2016 and creating the multi-agency gangs panel, essentially what we did was start to work in the early intervention and prevention space. And again, I won't go into the history of MAGPAN, but almost overnight, we saw lots of young people being referred to our service for early intervention and prevention that actually hadn't been arrested yet, that weren't involved with social care yet, which was really, really an epidemic of the lack of prevention that we saw from 2010 from the point of austerity. Essentially, what we've done over the last 5 years is increased our early intervention and intervention footprint, and we've shrunk our youth justice cohort. And that's really a success, and it's a success in the way we've been working. And when I say we've shrunk our youth justice cohort, I love seeing the look on people's faces when I tell them in the last 2 years, we've only had 2 young people that have been in custody. And that's not because of the pandemic. You know, we've seen high custody rates nationally. You know, Luton performs really well across their 3 statutory key performance indicators. But that success comes with a price. And that price is we have an early intervention and prevention cohort that is growing. And at any point, one of those could be a custodial case or a first-time entrant. But what we've done over the last 6 years in developing that is we have added on to our service. So, you know, we created MAGPAN, so early intervention footprint. We have brought targeted youth service over. We've now got edge of care. We haven't got a management structure that's able to drive that forward. That was identified in the inspectorate. And we also need a management structure and a service that's actually future-proof as well. And what I mean by that is now, along with colleagues who are here tonight in terms of portfolio holders and service directors, we're now looking at the next step. What does a contextual safeguarding service look like? What does a service that intervenes intensively with young people when they're 8, 9, 10 years old? That is a parallel development along with this. So realistically, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a management structure, but we're trying to create a service that is future-proof and meets the contextual safeguarding needs of young people in Luton. Lastly, and I will stop talking now, it's about rebranding as well. We've spent the last 6 years propagating the narrative around young people being exploited, almost victims of their social and economical and some of the issues that we have in today's society. So as such, we need to lose the label that is youth offending. We've got more young people that come through our doors as prevention cases now. They can't come to a youth offending service. They have to come to some other named service. I'll rest there, Chair, and open up for questions.
And that is, you said financial savings. And what impact this will have on the service delivery?
In terms of service delivery, I'm hoping it's going to have a positive impact by creating a management framework that has essentially practice managers that are not just there for operational day-to-day delivery. They're there to drive forward the developments and performance of the service. One of the things we really suffer from in the service area that we work in is we have strategic partnerships, pan-Bedfordshire and locally in terms of criminal justice. We also have strategic partnerships in terms of our children's social care partners, again, pan-Bedfordshire and locally, with a very small operational management team. And that operational management team has to manage the day-to-day business of staff and delivery. We don't quite have the scope to cover those partnerships. So we're actually increasing the footprint of our management team, but we're creating 2 posts that are there to drive forward the performance and delivery and service delivery, and 4 posts that are there to deal with the operational day-to-day. Short answer, Chair, would have been we're looking to improve service delivery.
More question, but maybe I will ask members if they wish to. Any question from the members? No. You can make the comments, yeah?
That's fine.
Thank you. Current structure has 7+4 targeted youth workers. And can you tell me what are those?
Yeah, of course. So we have currently 6 targeted youth workers in post and 1 is vacant. The issue with the targeted youth service, and again, for those of you that have heard me speak before, we kind of almost rescued the targeted youth service from a restructure back in 2017, and that's when we targeted them to serious violence. So the reality is it's quite a flat structure. There's no promotion within targeted youth. So for a targeted youth worker, we either have an opportunity across the other parts of the service in terms of youth justice, or they leave the service, as has happened to at least 2 targeted youth workers in the past. So redeveloping the current vacant post, so there's no targeted youth workers that are currently in posts that are being deleted. It's the vacant post that we've carried for some time that we managed to maintain from last year's savings. We redeveloped to a deputy practice manager, which then gives a natural progression for those targeted youth workers who want to develop into management.
So what area there you are targeting those 11 workers?
Where are they targeted? Oh, so since they've moved over to our service area, the youth workers have been targeted to working with serious violence. That's why we've seen a reduction in young people coming into custody. That's why we've seen a reduction in first-time entrants. There are still levels of what we call proactive youth service going on. And if you look at over the summer and some of the park projects we've been operating in Kingsway, Dallow, Lucy and South that have been attended, I mean, you know, incredible attendance, particularly in Manor Park, of between 50 and 60 young people every Wednesday night. We're currently running projects called TREE, which is tackling, reducing and ending exploitation, which sees the targeted youth service along with the police and other community partners actively engage with young people on the street and bringing them to places of safety. So at this moment, they're targeted towards the areas where organised crime operates, but serious violence has been quite high.
And that is, you know, that we have the problem of the gang stabbings and knife crimes. How would you actually fit in with the new system, in the new structure?
Okay, so we don't lose any services as part of this structure. What we actually do is we actually strengthen the management structure to adopt contextual safeguarding. So at some point in the next 6 months, the project is going to bring workers in that are able to work with young people earlier. So the long-term aim is to reduce the number of young people that become criminally exploited anyway. Knife crime is a consequence of child criminal exploitation. Child criminal exploitation is a consequence of young people not getting targeted intervention early enough, not being supported, and families not being supported. So that work is our ultimate aim. The work across serious violence and working with exploitation continues to this day. So the multi-agency gangs panel still operates to assess and target intervention at young people earlier. The Amber project still works across schools. We still have all of the programs working with somewhere in the region of 7 community organisations that work with our MAGPAN cohort. All that work continues, and this was the point that's really linked to this development, but also linked to the contextual safeguarding development. When I spoke to the executive, everything that we deliver in relation to serious violence or child criminal exploitation is when that child is already in crisis. So that what I describe as services at the cliff edge. We still need those, and we're going to need those for some time. When you have a town with the levels of social and economical issues we have, you're always going to have that. However, we need to look ahead for the future, and we need to start working further upstream, and that's what we're doing. So exploitation and the work of the multi-agency gangs panel still continues, Chair.
Thank you, David. I know you have been with Luton for a number of years, and keep your good work. But I would actually urge that, you know, the issues which Luton facing, I think you should be targeting more on this, the knife crime, gang crimes, and the antisocial behavior with the other, obviously, with the other departments. I think that is needed, and the communities are very concerned. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, Councillor Mead.
Thank you, Chair. Just a sort of a background-ish question. How does a child get referred to you? Where does that referral come from?
Depends what part of the service, councillor. So in terms of the multi-agency gangs panel, one of the major issues was looking at the way that social care works in terms of safeguarding thresholds. Schools would make referrals to MASH, or the referral and assessment team as it was then, and of course it wouldn't meet the thresholds. So that young person, would probably not get any intervention. One of the things that we did with the MAGPAN was we took away that consent to passing in those concerns. So anyone can refer into MAGPAN, teaching staff, a counsellor, a member of the public. A lot of those cohorts, though, those young people aren't in trouble yet. They haven't got a footprint with the police. So that's about early assessment, early identification, and targeting some of that statutory but community services to them. In terms of the youth offending service, so statutory youth justice, arrest from the police, court, so being made subject to court orders. In terms of edge of care, that's young people that come from children's social care that might be on child in need plans, that might then need kind of residential placements. Referrals to the targeted youth service come from schools, independently from parents, social care. The secret is the partnerships that we have and the panels that we attend, and how we not advertise, because that's the wrong way, how we work together as a multi-agency group. So we discuss the same young people in panels. So we're aware of them. We're picking up these young people. So lots of places.
So you receive the referral from the courts as well? From the courts, courts.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So when it's sentenced, one of the secrets of our success has been diversion and avoiding costly statutory orders on young people. Youth justice has shrunk as a result of the work over the last 6 years.
Question I think is, in the previous, the current structure, you don't have, you mentioned about early intervention, but in this one you have stated early intervention. Why is that?
The reality is, the way the service has developed over the last 6 years, we've added things on. So if you think about the creation, our development of MAGPAN in 2016 was a big step in terms of early intervention. Then adding the targeted youth service to there brings another level of early intervention. The making it obvious now is simply no more than kind of outlining a structure. But they're not separate. Even though they look separate, they're not, because there's crossovers, because some of the statutory diversion work you do as part of youth justice that you're measured on sits firmly within early intervention and prevention. Some of the work that statutory youth justice does, say across the delivery of interventions for young people open to MAGPAN, is clearly early intervention and prevention. What the new structure is designed to do is to give the service an identity. Because the last 6 years, like I say, adding things on, you have youth offending service, target youth service, MAGPAN, edge of care. We're bits and pieces all under one roof. We need an identity. And that structure is designed to develop that identity.
Good question. I am glad you have actually highlighted this. But I don't know about the resources, whether you can fit in this non-statutory activity.
Been doing a lot of non-statutory activity, Chair. But the work that we've been doing, and this is where it pays off financially. So let's take custody, for example. So in 2016-17, 32 kids went into custody from Luton. Now, The remands that go in are £217 a day, so £96,000 a year. That's what the local authority, that comes out of our budget for a young person. So a lot of the work that we did, not just as a youth justice service, but as a target youth service, as a multi-agency gangs panel, that work has seen us reduce remands to, as we sit here today, 1, which saves the council money. Now, I could go into every aspect of the work we do across early intervention, across edge of care. But if we just focus on that custody one for 1 second, because that is a huge cost to this local authority. But the work, the early intervention prevention work, has served to reduce that. So the ultimate long game ambition of creating a contextual safeguarding service under this would be to reduce exclusions at school, to reduce looked after children, for which costs the local authority a lot of money, to reduce the youth justice footprint, so reduce custody, reduce remands. The ultimate aim of this is to protect our children in our communities. But along with this work that we've done, it makes financial savings. And I'm coming from a position of power because in the last 5 years, we've reduced that footprint. We're at a point now where our 3 statutory performance indicators for youth justice, so what we're measured against, what we are legally obliged to do as a local authority is reduce first-time entrants. We've had 1 first-time entrant since April. We got 1 young person in custody, reducing the use of custody. And our reoffending sits at 21% at the moment, which sounds a lot until you compare us with the national average of 38. Now, that's not the brilliance of the youth offending service. That's not the brilliance of us in terms of our statutory delivery. That is all of the developments that we've done under early intervention and prevention. And we've demonstrated that.
You wanted to make a comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. As far as I can see, the trends that you've said look very encouraging, to be honest. And I think the earlier the intervention that you can get, which is what you've been targeting on, I think is the right thing. My only real question is that not what you're doing, but the perception perhaps of the public. The perception of the public is that there is an increasing problem with knife crime, and no matter how well you're doing, that doesn't always come across in the public perception.
Absolutely right. I mean, I could debate that all night. Media panics, the perspectives of young people. I mean, really interesting is there's an annual survey that happens in schools called the SHOE survey. And we got the results for the most recent one where young people, because it's been going for 5 years, so there's a 5-year comparison, feel safer this year than they have on the previous 4 years. They're also reporting that they know less, the way the questions are asked, they know less people that are carrying weapons or they suspect they're carrying weapons, and less people using drugs or selling drugs. So the perception for young people is they're feeling slightly safer. But I think this is why I don't like talking about knife crime, because, you know, talking about exploitation of young people, I know it's a big ask for members of the public to view large 15-year-old knife-carrying, drug-dealing young people as victims. But the reality is they are victims of the society we create around them. Because if a young person was given a choice, they would not choose to put their lives at risk every night by carrying a knife. They would not choose to sell drugs. They'd be in a job, they'd have families, they'd have houses. Now, we can't change everyone, but we keep going with that narrative. You know, we're not quite there with the police. We're not quite there with the Crown Prosecution Service in relation to that. But we keep propagating that narrative and we will get there.
Just during the debate, something came in my mind. You know, in terms of young boys and girls who are not attending schools, or they are suspended from school summer, and they're always involved in serious crimes afterwards. So during that time, when they are suspended from schools, and they are at home. Yeah, of course, it's the parents' responsibility. But what is the youth offending services role in that? What are we doing? And in terms of your intervention and prevention and strategy, are we going to do something about it?
Yeah, I mean, this is quite a lengthy answer, but I'll try and make it as short as possible. I mean, in terms of a youth offending service now, we work very, very closely with the Avenues Centre for Education. We obviously have a co-located worker from there who works with young people that are placed in pupil referral units and alternative learning provisions. There's a number of pathways to reduce exclusions, whether that pathway's around young people who bring sharp objects or knives into school, not with the intent to harm, but through some naive or childish way. So this pathway, so those young people can have some awareness sessions before they go back into school and integrate back into school. Similarly with drugs, similarly with sexually harmful behaviour. So we work very, very closely with getting young people back into education when they've been excluded. We know there's lots of exclusions now. I mean, as a youth offending service, that's the role we have. As a future contextual safeguarding service, we would be looking to actually support young people in those transitions. And again, I'll keep this really, really brief and really, really simple, but this is part of the parallel projects that's running with this. When you look at the 15, 16-year-olds that get involved in serious violence, 99 times out of 100, it's the same life journey. And that life journey starts with a certain lack of parenting capacity when they're 7, 8, 9 years old. Now, I don't mean bad parents. You know, I know a single parent who is single through domestic violence who has 5 young people. She's not a bad parent, but her capacity to parent is slightly less than anyone else's, given the task she has on her hands. So if we know that journey of that young person, and as I've said in the report, their behaviour, their educational attainment starts to drop, their educational ability starts to kind of falter. They then make that transition to secondary school. You ask any head teacher whether they know what young people are going to fail based on the paperwork when they come up, they'll tell you that. Certainly every head teacher I've spoken to has. So if we know that, why aren't we targeting those young people there? And when you look at the developments across children's social care with the family partnership service and the way we're working and the way we're working and developing, that's what our ultimate aim is, to provide that intensive support to reduce those exclusions, to provide intensive support for those young people that are excluded, but also to manage that transition to secondary school. Because once they're at secondary school, that behaviour is viewed by the educators in the context of the impact it has on the rest of the class, not what it is hiding or disguising in that young person.
Yeah, thank you very much for explaining that. A couple of months ago, about 6 months ago, we had an incident in Choni. And after that, Councillor Abbas and we all were very much involved in local area with the youth and schools and everyone. So at that time, we really felt, at that time, if we could have done something earlier, we might be able to have been able to save our life or something like that. So that was, that was a question mark at that time on us and at the local authority. So if you can comment on that.
Just a real quick comment there, because again, that's a much longer debate. But there's a lot of truth in what you say there. I mean, the local Safeguarding Children's Board is undertaking a thematic into that to look at systemically what could have been done differently and kind of what we're doing. I mean, the reality is, put simply, both of those boys were open to the multi-agency gangs panel. So, they were getting intervention, albeit voluntary, because they weren't in the statutory world. That report, that thematic report, because I'm part of it within my role, the things we're identifying and the research we're looking at is pretty much in line with what we're trying to create here in Luton. And we're not, I mean, the point in, we're not following a trend here. We're not copying anyone else. We are developing our services because our services have worked for our young people here. And I look forward to that report coming out, because I think it will inform where we're going with our contextual safeguarding team.
Thank you, Malik. Just one final question is, the operations managers, what pay scale they were on?
The operations managers were on the M5 pay scale.
M5. So they were 5, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah,
or probably 2
4 full-time equivalents, Chair. So,
yeah,
but
okay. And now they are 2 practice managers.
Yes.
Plus deputy managers.
Yeah. Hence the reason that there's an issue with redundancy, where we have two members of staff who have requested voluntary redundancy.
Okay. I know service director is also attending this meeting remotely. Does he want to make any comments?
Hi, Chair. It's Damien Alcock, Service Director for Quality and Improvement, and responsible for the Youth Offending Service. I'd just like to add that for the reasons that Dave's already outlined, it is necessary for us to make some changes to the management structure within the service, because we need to respond to the feedback that we've had through the HMIP inspection feedback, but also the evolution of the contextual safeguarding approach that we've been developing over the last 12 months. Most local authorities have gone down the route of developing a contextual safeguarding response, because there's a definitive need to deal with risks that are based outside of the family environment, and treat them differently to those that are based within the family environment. The child protection system that we used traditionally, and the legislation that's based upon, is very much about abuse within the family and harm within the family. But actually, the range of issues that Dave's raised there about criminal exploitation, becoming pressured into getting involved in criminal activity, into gang activity, they are risks that are outside of the family, and the methodology that we have for managing traditional child protection risks just aren't really suited to effectively dealing with these situations. So the approach that we've got, we're designing and developing for the needs of Luton, but it's based on research that's been done both by the University of Bedfordshire and their contextual safeguarding network, and the experiences of other local authorities that have already established these sorts of teams, particularly in some of the London boroughs, where there are some similar challenges to Luton. So this is a creative and innovative response that's shaped to the needs of Luton's children, young people and families and communities, to make sure that those children and young people get the support that they need to prevent them getting involved in that sort of activity. And then if we're unsuccessful in that, and some do become involved in that sort of activity, we have ways to intervene and bring them out of that cycle. It does change the structure in a way that there is a risk of potential redundancy. That's not because there aren't positions available, it's more because of the change of grading and whether members of staff want to accept that reduction in grade of their role. Apart from that, Chair, I think Dave spoke eloquently about the rationale for the proposal and the current situation in Luton. So that would be all I'd want to say.
I think it is quite detailed and detailed report, and I think the members are satisfied what you have presented today, and hope this model will work for Luton. Thank you. And do we approve the recommendations?
Yes, approved.
Thank you. Thank you
very much, councillors.
Thank you, councillors.
Public health senior management structure.
Chair, I will be presenting it. It's Laura Church.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Laura.
So I hope that you've got sufficient detail in the paper, but if I just summarise that we have been operating under the revised structure since November last year. And one of the issues that I've been dealing with is the anomaly in the structure of having both the Deputy Director of Public Health and the Director of Public Health reporting to me as the Corporate Director. It is quite an important position that the Director of Public Health has oversight of the work of the Deputy Director of Public Health. And so this paper that is before you tonight proposes a change to the senior management structure at Luton so that the Deputy Director does report to the Director of Public Health. It would be given that they have to be a consultant in public health, the salary line for the Deputy Director remains unchanged, so it is just a change in the reporting lines. The second part of the paper considers the need for an additional consultant in public health post to make sure that we have enough contingency and resilience and capacity in dealing with ongoing issues. As you know, COVID, we've been under COVID situation for at least 18 months. That's likely to continue. So I'm proposing to put an additional a consultant in public health post back into the structure. I have delegated authority to do that as the corporate director under the Constitution. The point that I'm bringing to you tonight is that I already know that the market for consultants in public health, the post which has been graded at MA, is well below what the market would expect. So I'm asking for a dispensation to be able to apply and go through the process for a market supplement in advance of the normal process of having the evidence of failure to recruit. It's quite important at the moment because, as you know, the Director of Public Health left Luton, Lucy Hubber left in June, and we have interim acting up at the moment. So to give some resilience, I do need to make sure that we can go out for a consultant in public health as soon as possible at an appropriate level of pay. And in the paper, I've outlined to you the levels of pay that consultants in public health are getting at the moment. Since the paper, there have been some further adverts for deputy directors of public health and consultants in public health that are in line with the figures in the paper, or more than that. So the deputy director at Essex has currently just been advertised at a salary of 120,000. So these are highly sought after posts, so it is quite important that we have a market supplement. So the paper before you asks for two things: the change in the structure to have the deputy director reporting to the director, and the second is for agreement to go outside of the market supplement policy to apply a market supplement to this post when it first goes out to the consultant post. Thank you, Chair.
So how much you are asking for the supplement, market supplement?
The market supplement hasn't been determined as yet, and actually that's not that's got a process of its own that needs to go through. So that's still being undertaken by HR.
Okay. Any question from the members? No? You're not asking the question because this is Laura's last meeting is for Luton, is it? You want to be nice. Okay, they all want to be nice to you. and we wish you well, and we approve this. Is that agreed? Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
agreed totally, and good luck, Laura.
Good luck for the new post, and hopefully you will remember Luton too.
I will very fondly remember Luton after 33 years.
Okay,
So
thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. The next one is lever demographics and missing sensitive data.
Evening, Chair, evening, councillors. So I'm doing an overview of the exit interviews for last year against the trend analysis over 3 years. We do have an advantage now of having pretty good trend analysis using the information we're getting from exit interviews and what's being stored on our database. So the only thing that we need to note, and we're probably all aware of, is that there's been 2 events which have disrupted normal trend analysis, which has been the program of outsourcing our catering organisation over the last 2 years, and of course this year the COVID pandemic, which has had a direct impact on ourselves in terms of creating an emergency budget, but also it's had an effect on the external market and the economy over the last year, which certainly has had an impact on some of our lever statistics. We can see certainly that unfortunately, due to the emergency budget, we had to do a number of programs which affected a number of areas, such as changing the family centres and a number of other areas where we had to restructure. And this had a dramatic change in terms of our numbers, in terms of voluntary redundancy and compulsory redundancy, which is a sharp increase from the previous 2 years. Normally, our trend analysis in terms of turnover is normally made up from, as you would expect, from part-time workers down at the junior grades of L3, and also from the L3 to L7, where we normally have to focus what our concerns are in terms of turnover, because obviously from a council's point of view, we don't want to lose our staff. But you would expect a certain amount of turnover with the part-time staff, and you can see that the pandemic has had a dramatic effect in terms of reducing the numbers that were leaving the council. And I think that was probably an impact on people being concerned about what job opportunities were elsewhere. So if we take those into account, we're then getting back into the normal trend analysis. And of course, you would expect from the results that we've got that most people are leaving because of career opportunities, higher pay, or better benefits. And this area is the one area that we normally focus on in terms of seeing whether we can improve our offer internally. The movement really has shown a decrease over the year in terms of leavers, but I think that we did start from last year a number of programs to try and retain our staff, which was to focus very much on career changes, the ability for people to change their careers, trying to improve benefits where we could in terms of supplementary benefits. And it's very difficult to see whether all of this is having an impact at the moment with the changes that have happened over the year. So we won't probably see an impact on some of the programs that we've implemented last year until we have a look-see in terms of where we're going next year. But the exit interview information that we do get back does indicate a number of trends. we're normally fairly confident of why people are leaving, because the exit interview process is normally done in a two-structured way where managers have to fill in certain information which they have to get from their employees. That's why we have fairly reliable information on sort of the core reasons as to why people are leaving. But then employees are invited to fill in a supplementary exit interview process, which gives a bit more of information in terms of aspects of work and how they've operated in Luton. And that bit gives us a lot more information which is useful for us in terms of how we can improve the life cycle of the employee within Luton. Unfortunately, we're not getting enough information from, not enough people are filling in those exit interview forms. And there is a programme which we've got going at the moment to develop that process, but it is dependent on our upgrade of the iTrent system, which then will allow more self-service returns from employees, and we'll try and change the process so we've got more enforcement in terms of making sure that that information is completed. But that program of rolling out and improving the iTrent system is coming in now. So we would expect some of those developments to come in at the beginning of next year, where we hope to then improve the accessibility of mainly our frontline staff. And that's the area that we don't get enough information from, because we're constantly waiting, relying on paper analysis from managers, which is a lot more unreliable. But when we look at what information we do have, Luton is very good for relationships with colleagues, the interesting level of work and relationship with managers, and that has been a constantly good returns from people who are leaving. The areas where we need to see some improvements is obviously job security has gone down dramatically, as you would expect over the last year with the changes that we've had. But I think in the past, although employees are confident or seem to have good relationships with their immediate managers, there seems to be a breakdown a lot more in terms of how confident they are in terms of the senior management. And I think often this comes down to communication. Now, from last year, it came through in the employee surveys and the exit interviews, and senior managers have made quite dramatic attempts compared to before in terms of communication. And I think this is showing through in the slow improvement in terms of the exit interviews that we're actually getting. But I suppose bearing in mind, certainly over the last year, with the turmoil that's gone on in some of the organisations, employees are obviously not going to be as positive as we would like in that area, because they would have probably liked more communication in terms of some of the redundancy programs, because this was done in a rush. So again, it has an impact in terms of what information that we get into our exit interviews. But in terms of profiling, in terms of other areas which we would analyse across the council, you would expect the age profile of the leavers is very much consistent with the age profile of the council. Where we're lacking information is on certain more sensitive information, like on race analysis. Although the trends don't look adverse, we can't really confidently say that there is any issues that we're having in relation to that side of employment, which then leads to the second part of the report in terms of in order to do any sensible analysis, whether it's equal opportunities, exit interviews in terms of concerns of employment, we do need much better information than we have at the moment. And we are suffering, certainly historically, from having a lack of information in terms of sensitive information from employees, which is personal information, which we're dependent on employees voluntarily giving us that information. We have done quite a consistent program over the last year to try and improve that. We've written out to individual employees, we've written out giving them what's on our database, We've then chased them up again, and we're going to chase them again. I think there's, although we've done a marked improvement, it's still not good enough, and we will be going out again. But I think the key thing is that we're still missing a large number of employees who can't return the information electronically. And again, the upgrade of the iTrent system hopefully will be able to reach a wider audience in terms of our employees. That will then improve our information, and then employees will be able to see what information they've got on their database. So it's an ongoing program which we will be seeing going into the first quarter, second quarter of next year to try and improve that data. That will then improve a number of areas of our supporting initiatives in terms of making sure our Equal Opportunities Programme is operating as we would like. I think in terms of the data that was provided in the report, there's many areas that you can analyse where you want to go, but I think I'll be quiet now just in case there's any focus of interest that you want to ask.
Any questions from the report? Okay, I have one question. You said this is ongoing issue, at least for last few years, and the employees do not have to fill in exit interviews. And is there is no statutory requirement for the exit interview?
This is for exit interviews now. Yes. No, there isn't, but we can do. I think the key thing is we probably need to lock in managers much more into the process to make sure that that data is filled in. At the moment, if they're unable to complete the information in a meeting, the manager then passes the form over electronically to the employee, and then is not unable or tends to rely on the employee to fill in that data. So we need to have a much more, I suppose, enforcement type way of getting that into the process, which should see some results of improvement, because if we've got that in a very fast turnaround, we can then monitor it as it's being filled in. Whereas at the moment, various different parties are relying on that information to be completed.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, normally we hear that people are leaving jobs because of the workload, mental stress, and because of the mental health and well-being. But any of the reasons, there are a lot of reasons here. We have seen them. People don't mention these things. This is what we read in the newspapers anyway. It's the public perception.
Yeah, sorry, I missed the first bit in terms of the actual subject matter.
Yeah, normally we hear that people leave their jobs, they give up their job because of the workload and mental stress. But here, all the reasons they have written here, they're not mentioning these things. So the public perception is that what I'm saying. So is there any particular reason they're not leaving? When they leave, they on the forms they don't write this kind of things, or they're not mentioning these things?
Yes, I think where this is being reflected is they're not asked. Where they're asked directly is probably the workload, and you'll notice that is a concern within the information that is being provided by the individual employee. So I think it's being reflected there. What people won't volunteer necessarily unless they have an individual concern. So we do have a number of what employees would write in loose format, which can't be analysed electronically. But I think that the other answer would be people probably wouldn't be willing to put that information in that they were under stress or couldn't handle the workload necessarily. So it's probably being underreported. But we do pick up the fact that if you look at the trend analysis on workload, and certainly now with the numbers of staff that we've cut, I think that you're seeing that everywhere, whether it's you pick that up in conversation or you see that in the remarks that are being made. So I think we're getting that indirectly.
But one question is about the sickness, what's called dismissal, how that works, because it's a long period of sickness or?
Well, I think in the terms of the stats this year, the sickness dismissals have gone down dramatically. Now, it's very difficult to completely pin that down on anything because you could argue that due to the flexibility of work and people working at home, some of the issues that were being caused at work have been minimized because people are finding it easier to work at home. I think that's a factor. I think also there is a practical side of it that some of the, which I think is where you were coming from with your point of question, is that the actual process of disciplinary that's within the sickness process, that was slowed down by the pandemic because not so many hearings were being held. But I think also there was a concern within Luton about the level of our sickness about 3 years back. So there were programs that were introduced to actually increase the monitoring of staff and increase the actual disciplinary process, which it sounds not very helpful in a sickness situation when you're talking about disciplinary, but it has to be a process which is a warning to a staff and then support that's provided. And that goes through about 4 different stages. So by the time you're getting to a disciplinary situation, it normally means that there is a problem with that particular employee, which is causing an issue which cannot be resolved. And I think those cases have fallen dramatically over the last year. So we won't know whether we've got a better trend going completely until next year, when obviously the pandemic's gone out the way and we've got the normal flow of processes coming through the organisation. But I think overall the sickness rates across the council are looking a lot better. Well, they were looking better before, and I think a lot of the issues that we had before have gone away in terms of the employees understand what the process is, and management are monitoring much better and giving a lot more support to employees who might have a sickness issue.
So what is the time frame for this process? If an employee is sick a long time, that will go to appeal, or what is the?
Yeah, it is over. By the time you're getting to a dismissal situation, it means that the employees would have gone through our sickness trigger process, and normally you would have a high frequency of sickness, variable sickness, or you've got sickness that has been going on for over a long period of time, which gets reviewed over a 3-stage period. So you could be talking as much as straight away if it was continuous, and a lot of these cases aren't. It could be over a 6-month review process. It tries to be as fair as possible.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, just a question. You know, I think we a couple of months ago we were discussing the same item, and we demanded the information about the joiners, people who join Luton Borough Council, and their all the data, like how many people are joining Luton Borough Council, how many women, how many males, and are they true? Are the true reflections of the community diversity? So we demanded this 3-4 months ago. This information.
Passed in the council, isn't it? Yeah, that is. This is the sickness. This is the data providing. For the exit interview, and that is separate matter. I think we should be talking somewhere else.
I think this is a public.
If you want to make a comment,
it is in the public interest. If we can have that information.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. I'm on. Because of the echo, I couldn't hear the first point. Sorry, it's probably my ears. I couldn't hear.
Councillor Malak is talking about the resolution was passed a few months ago in the full council to make the workforce more representative.
Oh yes, yes. That's one of the reasons why we were anxious to improve the information of the sensitive data to support that programme. And so a lot of knock-on effects in terms of what the council direction is, that is all part of that programme. So if anything, the impetus is more to support that than it was trying to improve exit interviews, although that information is useful. So those things are a concern of us to make sure that programme is being supported. Because then what is more important, which I think other analysis and other reports have been looking at, is then you're able to see the progression of staff. Have we got the right representation across the organisation? It impacts everything we actually do. So the better monitoring we can do, then those programmes can be supported.
Thank you. And do the members note the report? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Back again, Mr. Island. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Has that come on? Yes, it has come on. Yes, so thank you, Chair. As you're aware, presented at the last meeting with regards to the committee to look at the addition of some additional conditions for the vehicles. And I was sent away to add some additional information to the report, which has been carried out. In particular, to clarify the issue that actually it is choice with regards to the provision of CCTV, the enhanced element regards to emissions, and also to provide some examples, so picture examples of the types of vehicles that would be included under this new provision. Just to really reaffirm what I said last time, is that this is about additionality. This is not taking anything away. We're not removing anything to do with 100% wheelchair accessible vehicles or accessible vehicles. This is about providing an additional set of conditions which would allow us to broaden the range of vehicles that would be available to the trade. The additional benefit, and Councillor Wynne last time, had an aspiration with regards to the emission standards and in fact the zero emission vehicles, is actually this would be a significant step forward in the fact that all of the vehicles shown at Appendix B are either Euro 6 or the vehicle that's shown at the top of the last page of the pictures there is actually an electric vehicle, so 100% electric vehicle. And certainly our aspiration alongside members is that we will be very much an inherent part of that climate change discussion, looking at those air quality issues within the town, and also, of course, the infrastructure that will be needed to support an electric Hackney carriage fleet going forward. So basically, I'm hoping that pretty much picks up on all of the queries and questions that were posed at the last committee meeting. So I'll leave it there and leave it open to questions. Thank you, Chair.
Please, I'm afraid I'm still at the same point. I appreciate what you've said about the alternative vehicles. And yes, of course, we're talking about bringing in newer vehicles with lower emissions, and that's very welcome. I have to say that I still end up in a position where, without data about what's going to be done about reducing the very polluting vehicles that we currently have out there in the fleet, I find the proposal that's before us unacceptable, I regret to say.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Welcome, Tony, again. In terms of 100% electric vehicles, this is what you said in Euro 6, low emission. So in terms of our argument last time, we were discussing either do we have an assessment of our drivers, are they going to afford this? Or, it would be affordable for them.
If I may, Chair. So, yeah, one of the elements is this mid-range size vehicle I suppose, is an equivalent value to looking at a second-hand Hackney carriage currently. So actually, there would be the added benefit. So looking at that sort of £25,000 to £30,000 mark actually would be the equivalent of looking to purchasing so let's say a traditional black cab style vehicle, which would be a Euro 5. These vehicles would be Euro 6 and above, or 6 plus. So actually there is an additional benefit there, but again it is down to the choice of the proprietor. This broadens the choice, but it keeps the council's provisions with regards to accessibility, and I would have to say also improves the aesthetic look of the fleet that would be available certainly in the town centre and in the wards, etc.
Yeah, thank you for telling that. But after the pandemic, we have seen that a lot of people are under lot of pressure because of the financial circumstances. So we have to look at that. And also, I just want to ask you, about the electric charges. Have we got enough electric charges in Luton to charge the cars?
I think if I come back to on the point of the electric chargers, we were successful, I think, about 3 years ago in getting funding in for 4 fast charging locations. So that's the start of the process, and they are specific for Hackney carriage and private hire. Obviously, the council is reviewing its provision in regards to electric charging points across the authority area, and obviously we would expect a review as part of that going forward with regards to what we need to facilitate both Hackney carriage and private hire as we would look to shift. And that's really why I'm saying that actually that needs to be done in, as an authority. We would need to be part of the whole look at how we're going to deal with climate change, how we're going to deal with emissions. There's no point in, from a licensing authority point of view, coming up with a range of provisions, and then let's say, for instance, we introduce as authority, we introduce a standards for a clean air zone, which actually is far more stringent, and therefore all the work we've done for licensing is pushed out because that is a higher standard than actually we have for the licensing of the vehicles. So actually, it needs to be done in consultation. It needs to be done in the round. What I will say with regards to this, obviously the financial burden, this will give the trade additional options so they can choose how they want to spend their money. It will give them, they have a choice of buying a second-hand vehicle against a brand new vehicle, which will be of a higher emission standard. So again, they can make their choice. I would suspect that the majority who would not be necessarily looking at long journeys may wish to go for this new range of mid-range size vehicles, and therefore the added benefit is not only driver comfort but also the emission standards for the actual vehicle itself.
Yeah, I agree. I understand where you're coming from, but at the same time, in terms of air quality, low emissions, we are, working on this, and the council is quite sensitive about it. But my argument is here, Chair, the affordability of drivers, we have to look at that. And also in terms of electric charges, I think drivers should have option or their choice. So if even they are able to, they are going to join these electric cars, low emissions one, Euro 6 or not, because a lot of drivers are not able to buy them. This is what I think.
You want to make amendment on this report? Yes. So you propose it, and if that's
if it's possible, drivers can have a choice.
So what is your view?
The choice is there. So actually this will, in effect, currently we have two sets of standards, two sets of conditions, should I say. One for the classic black cab style vehicle that you're used to seeing out on the streets. You've then got what we term as the converted vehicles, which are the van conversions, which again you'll tend to see. So that's the likes of the Mercedes Vito. This will add a third set of conditions for a slightly smaller vehicle, which provides those additional benefits, and the trade can still make the choice. They can still go for a classic look style vehicle. They can go for the larger van conversion vehicles, or they can go for this mid-range. So again, this is all about extending choice, extending the provisions, but without removing any of the provisions regards to accessibility, nor is it removing the look of what we would expect to see of Hackney Carriage, a taxi out on a rank or to be hailed, and adds additional benefits with regards to emissions, the aesthetic look of the vehicle, and also the conditions in which the drivers are working as well.
Can you say that again? Are we able to do that? I mean, low emissions 06, it's 06, isn't it? Euro 6, sorry, Euro 6. Would that be a choice for drivers to use other vehicles?
So this will enable them. So if they were to go for a mid-range vehicle, which are the conditions you have before you, they would be able to choose a vehicle that was either, it would be within that classification of Euro 6, Euro 6 Plus, or even fully electric, which that vehicle would currently be out of scope under our current conditions.
Okay, who is first? Okay.
Ladies first.
Okay.
I think broadening the options is great. Obviously, we know Euro Class 6, they're the ones that are compliant with like the ULEZ zone, right?
Yes.
Yes. So we know here we've got in our current fleet lots of lower Euro Class vehicles. Have we got any scope of how many of those would potentially move on to a Euro 6 vehicle if they have these wider range of cheaper options?
To be honest here, councillors have been speaking to the trade quite a lot recently with regards to a lot of the changes for Hackney carriages. There is obviously those element of the trade that are looking towards what's going to happen with the airport, and obviously longer journeys, potentially better income, etc. But yeah, there's got to be the time for them to be able to travel, etc. You've got the other cohort, which are those that predominantly want to work in town and the surrounding areas, which probably, either through their own personal circumstances, etc., or the fact they don't particularly want to work out of the borough, will do shorter journeys. For those who I would have to say at the moment are predominantly those that trade with the older vehicles, I would expect them to want to change. And actually, this has been one of the challenges over the last couple of years, is the fact that they've been looking for an affordable alternative rather than keeping those old vehicles, and of course the maintenance costs to try and keep those older vehicles on there. So I would expect a significant shift. Can't say exactly how many, but I would say that all of that trade that have been waiting for an alternative option, rather than having to spend, by anybody's estimate, £65,000 on a new ultra low emission vehicle, would be looking to move, for a range of reasons. Maintenance costs of keeping the vehicle on the road, driver conditions, better mileage, and then of course emission standards as well.
Thank you, Chair. Listening to the conversation backwards and forwards, a thought went through my mind. It was mentioned about the quality of the air in the town centre. I think a lot could be done to help that if we could persuade taxi drivers when they're waiting for a fare to switch their engines off. A number of times I come down Upper George Street and there's a line of taxis curling round into Wellington Street, and they're all sitting there with their little smoky diesels ticking over. Whether it's to provide warmth, air conditioning or not, I don't know. But same up at the station. We could do a lot to, I think, to improve the quality of air in the town centre if we could get these taxis to switch their engines off, if nothing else.
We can certainly work with highways to look at signage regards to, not idling vehicles. But of course, the newer vehicles would have facilities such as the auto stop. So actually, if they're in a line and they're moving forward slowly, each time they stop, the engines would switch off anyway. So there's those additional benefits. There are facilities on newer vehicles, as we all know, which aren't available to those vehicles that were built 10 years ago.
So I was happy as I suppose.
Okay. I have one question. Is the tinted glass? What is the issue?
No issues with these vehicles, Chair. They because they are purpose-built Hackney carriages, they wouldn't come with dark tints anyway. So that's a discussion in regards to private hire, not Hackney carriage.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Wayne. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but effectively what Councillor Nix has just asked is exactly the same thing that I've been asking for last time and again today, which is we've got all of these old polluting vehicles. Most of the worst of those are still going to be in the town centre. And I would like to know, and I could understand if we say yes to the smaller vehicles, which are less expensive. There is, of course, an alternative, which is the council could help subsidise some of the purchase of some of the better, larger vehicles. But in reality, the worst polluting ones of the existing fleet are still going to continue to be marching around in the town centre. If I could feel that there was any real commitment by the fleet owners to actually move those worst polluting vehicles out of the town centre and go on to the new ones, I would be happy with this report. The reality is that the report is asking for us to approve the lower vehicles in the vague hope that we'll get rid of the most polluting vehicles. And that seems to me that we're being asked to give concessions on the one hand and not get anything definitive back on the other. So we're being asked to commit and the fleet holders are not being asked to commit. That seems to me to be a totally wrong way of approaching this.
Chair, obviously there's two options really today. We either keep things as they are and then nothing changes, or we have the ability today to make a decision and look to see how that impacts on the lower emission vehicles. I am more than happy to come back at a later committee to advise of how we've seen the shift and whether there needs to be more work, and obviously that hopefully over that period of time as well, there'll be more discussions regards to the overall discussions across the authority with regards to emissions, clean air zones, climate change. And again, we're more than happy to be an active participant within those as well. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, can I propose that should we approve this, we get, say, an annual update of the fleet and how things have changed?
I'm more than happy to do that.
Amy, can you say again what's...
Saying, can I propose that we get an annual update of the current fleet of Hackneys in Luton and how things have changed in terms of class and emissions?
I was actually thinking of 6 monthly. Maybe, you know, the changes we made, and maybe in 6 month update something, and maybe then annually update.
More than happy to do that, and I can do that for both private hire and Hackney carriage, so you can get a view across the whole of the fleet. Okay. Okay. Do the members agree with the recommendations?
Chair, I'd like to call back that
Okay.
I don't need to.
All those in favor, please show hand. Okay. Are you noting? Okay. All against? Thank you. The proposal is carried. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
I feel that, yes, I always feel that disappointing last item where everyone's itching to get home. Thank you, Chair. This is just to double check that members are content with the forward look for your committee. To note that your next meeting is due to be on the 1st of November, and we have 3 substantive items down for discussion: customer service operating model, staffing at the Vale, and a model pay policy for schools. There are obviously kind of further items planned in for future meetings beyond that, but we won't go into those for now.
We have 3 reports.
3 reports and me again.
And we have nothing on in November. Just 1. December, sorry.
At the moment, yes. I think there may be another couple of reports that are going to be programmed in over the coming weeks.
Okay. Agree with this, everybody? Yeah, that's fine. You were listening the report from the Youth Offending Service. Probably in the future, if you can ask them to provide some data information about their activities, and I think that would be helpful maybe in next year.
Great.
In March,
very happy.
Or something.
I'll alert them to that, and if we can program that in, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, because they are doing a lot of activities with the young people and the court and the other partners agencies, and maybe members should be aware of those, what's happening, and maybe we can suggest something to them.
I'm sure that will be absolutely fine. Yes.
Thank you. Okay. If that is it, and that concludes the business of this meeting.